to acquire clients consistently so you can grow your business and your income to live a great lifestyle. This is Dave Finale and the RE Skill Builder Podcast.
Well, good morning, everybody. Today is Friday, August 14th, 2020. That's 2020. And there are 18 days left in this month. I made a point of that last night. I made a point of that this morning in my run after run video. But it's Real Estate Talk, TGIF, episode 113. Now, guys, we've got some really heavy hitters here. And my question to you first is, do you guys know what TGIF stands for?
I'm sure you'll tell us.
Why? It means thank God it's finale. I mean, come on. I mean, that's why we're here, right? I mean, you know, there's a lot of reasons to be on, but we're all here to talk real estate. This program started 111 weeks ago. We've done 113 shows. We've had 2 extra shows, and it started to give information and to support real estate agents throughout the country. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. We've had marketers now. We've had real estate agents. We've had all kinds of business people. We've had authors like Mike Michalowicz, Haas Pratt, John Shep, like Tom Ferry, Brad Inman. We've had lots of people. And Michael, you've been on. Dave, you've been on. This is the first time Charlie's been on in person. But it's been a great run, and we're going to keep it going. And today we're going to talk matters that matter to everybody in our industry, and that industry is real estate. So what I'd like to do is go around and start with Charlie. Just introduce yourselves really quickly, and then we'll get into the subject.
Sure. Well, thanks, Dave, and welcome to Dave and Michael as well. And it'll be a pleasure to be here with you. I am one of the 2 partners at Prominent Properties Sotheby's International Realty. We've got 15 offices throughout northern and central New Jersey, about 700 agents. And my other gig for the next 15 months is right now I'm the president-elect of the National Association of Realtors, and I'll be president in November of 20, where it would have been in New Orleans, but because of COVID, it'll be in this same screen in front of about 5,000 of my closest friends, and just do the job that you're assigned. So look forward to it.
Great. Let's go down to thank you, Charles. Let's go down to Michael.
Hey, good morning. Great to see you guys. Looking forward to the next hour, that's for sure. Michael Brand, Regional Director of Keller Williams Realty, which covers New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and as of 3 months ago, Manhattan. I'm also the owner of Kidderminster Metropolitan in Morristown, New Jersey, Town Square in Basking Ridge, Partners in Trumbull, Connecticut, and Elite in Massapequa Park, New York. So this year is my 25th year in real estate. So wouldn't be in any other industry now or any other time in life. So love it every day.
Awesome.
And by the way, I do like my hat, Dave.
Oh, right.
You don't have a hat.
I don't have a hat.
You might get one if you perform properly today. Anyway, so
he even signs it. He gives what episode you were on. I love this. This is great.
Right. Mr. DeVoe, Dave DeVoe, introduce yourself, please.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. Dave DeVoe, I'm a real estate agent. I've been in the business about 10 years. I run the DeVoe Group, and we cover pretty much all of New Jersey. We have a few teams, expansion teams, and about right now 25 agents. And I learned almost everything I know from these guys here.
Well, thank you for that. You've just met me. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so I want to start with let's talk about the state of the real estate market. I mean, you know, when we started with the quarantine back in March, it was it was kind of like a hiccup, you know, like a hesitation for a lot of people. And I'm sure that was nationally. Charlie, can you speak to, you know, what is different or what happened with you guys like at National Association of Realtors and then locally, and then we'll go around the discussion.
Well, I think, you know, if you look back at all the indicators, we were all kind of trying to believe this wouldn't happen in late February. And then all of a sudden, it started to really happen in New York, and then by extension, New Jersey. So by mid-March, and we shut down probably a week before everybody else did when the governor shut us down because we had a couple of situations that we knew of, and we just said this wasn't worth it, and we started to work remote like everybody else. I think what it's done is it's made us understand all the things that we knew we were capable of in terms of visual marketing, virtual marketing, personal contact, sphere of influence, all those things that in my 40 years all came to the forefront once, those first 2 or 3 weeks were over. As I said to somebody, those first 2 or 3 weeks seemed to take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Now,
Sure.
and now I can't believe it's going to be September and my son's going back to college on Monday, which is a whole separate story, which is maybe episode 125. Why are kids going back to school? But I think there's a couple things. Number one, the business is people, the business is relationships. That hasn't changed. What it forced us to do is really think about how we communicated with customers, with clients. How many people picked up the phone and just said, "Are you okay?" But then followed it up a month later with, "Well, hope you're okay. By the way, you could sell your house in 24 hours if you think about it."
Right.
So I think we pivoted, learned how to do things differently in the brokerage community. On a national level, we shut down all travel. We told, I'm not going to travel until at least January of 21. We made that decision as a leadership team back in June, just saying until there's more information on the virus, the last thing that anybody should do is put their health out there. But that doesn't mean we haven't done what we needed to do for the industry. So one of the examples, and I chimed in last time you were with Michael, was on the advocacy level, right? When the CARES Act was approved, realtors and other independent contractors had the same unemployment benefits as employees.
Huge.
That doesn't happen by accident. That happens by being present, if you will, both at the state level in Trenton and in DC. So when somebody asks you for an RPAC investment, and then I won't tell you on this screen who's given the most or who's not given at all, but I just want you to know that when somebody asks for an RPAC investment, there's a reason. It's for access to the political landscape that protects our industry. Think about if you had everybody treated as an employee, and Michael and David, you run companies as well, and you had to pay unemployment taxes on every commission. What would that do to your infrastructure? What pressure would that put on you? And then what benefits do you have to give people because they're now employees and not independent contractors? Those are the things that were so important during this period, and that's where the RPAC dollars and the investments matter. And in Trenton, we were deemed essential in the first week, which allowed us to do closings. Go down the road to Pennsylvania, they couldn't do closings. They were not essential. Title companies could not close property. People couldn't move. You had log jams that were just beyond log jams. So I think there's a lot of things, and I'll get into some things more, but we pivoted. We learned how to do business differently. We still do business. I think all of us at the end of the year probably will be in the same ballpark in terms of numbers, even though we lost 2.5 months. And maybe arguably 2.5 of the best months of the year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I'm moving right down to Michael and Dave. And talked about, have we really done business differently to a point, except for the virtual part of it?
Well, I think Charlie used a great word, pivot. This is the fastest pivot I've ever had to go through. We've got about 22 employees, which we were able to keep them all employed. So being able to pivot them to work from home and set up phones and systems and direct deposit for agents and ways to get paid directly from the closing table. People couldn't do the face-to-face. We did a lot of infrastructure changing very quickly in order to support our people. That way they could support their clients at a very high level. I think using Zoom and vehicles like this, video, has added a whole nother layer to our lead generation process. It used to be, lead to appointment to contract to close. Now it's lead to virtual or digital appointment to in-person appointment to contract to close. So I think as an industry, I think we all know, and Dave is definitely in on this too. The industry's been evolving the last couple of years, and I think what the real estate industry looks like at the end of this year is very different than what it looked like at the beginning of this year. It's just the way we're doing the business, the way we're communicating, and the way we're servicing our people. So I think we're evolving digitally very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, I really do believe what you said. I agree with everything you said. Dave, expand on that. Dave?
Is he frozen?
No. Dave, can you hear me? I can't hear Dave.
Yeah, I could hear
He
you.
might be.
Okay, we're having a little difficulty here. Dave, can you hear me?
It's frozen. I can't.
Yep, it's not there.
Dave, go out and come back in, please.
Michael just said something, Dave, that I think
Yeah.
is really important. When you talk about the infrastructure and how we handle that, you have to do that on two levels. Number one, you have to do it for your own company, but then you also have to comply with all the regulations and all the mandates,
Guidelines,
and the guidelines from the governor.
the CDC rules, and yeah.
That what you had to provide, what was your paid time off, paid leave, hold jobs, what jobs are essential, what jobs need to be in an office, what jobs could be remote. So, there are a lot of things to not just saying you had to do the infrastructure, but you had to be compliant on the labor laws. So not an easy task.
We did a lot of calls early on for a lot of our teams with labor attorneys, making sure we were educating our business owners and teams, making sure they were doing things the right way. The governor came on early and said, you work remotely. Your employer shouldn't force you to work in the office. So being able to manage that process and knowing, and I know we're going to talk about it today, with people with kids at home that can't go to camps, can't go to school, it's definitely changed the way, we do business. And I love what Charlie said before, reinforcing RPAC. And when you look at New Jersey and what New Jersey realtors did to support us during this time, I look at multiple states and we have not had the severe impact on our sales side as other states have had. And that's a huge credit to the folks, Jared and Charlie and other folks at New Jersey realtors that made a lot of that happen. And I was talking to Jared or emailing pretty regularly, and they were in constant communication with the governor's office. That's great to have that.
And one last thing on that, Michael, all of the agents that are top agents, right? Because this business is still 80-20, 90-10.
90-10, yeah. It's moving to 92-8, I think.
We would be embarrassed as four people here, or certainly the three of you would be, to know the people that have never given $1 to RPAC that are making 6 and 7 figures. And when you ask them for a check, they're insulted.
They unclipped the $25 with the board renewals.
Yeah. Think about how you communicate with people, what you've done for them. And then I sent an email out when it was the local Eastern Bergen board, Dave, before the merger, I don't know, 5 years ago.
Right.
And I sent it to the 20 platinum agents, whatever the number was. 7 people wrote a check for $1,000. 4 people took the time to call me and said that they could not understand why they were on the list. Okay? Think about that. They don't even understand what protects their business.
Right.
But yet they're the first ones to bash somebody.
Absolutely. So Dave had some technical difficulties. Dave, there's a bunch of stuff we've been talking about. I'd like to get, what you've got to say about, pivoting, everything we've had to do to change around, and RPAC as well. So hit it, Dave.
I just think there is also a lack of education about RPAC. If you ask realtors what that even is, most of them won't know. Back to what you were saying about pivoting. For a lot of us, it was a panic and then a pivot and then a quick realization that we really didn't have to change much. There was some difference in the scripting and how we approached, because it first came from contribution and how can we help, and is everybody okay, like Charlie was saying before. Then when we realized that we're pretty much set up to do this business anywhere, that was pretty cool. to be able to say, I mean, and not only just real estate, a lot of businesses that really quickly just got right back into the groove.
Right.
And I think what you're seeing right now, when you look at the market stats, is when you said it was quite possibly the 2 biggest months of the year, it seems like it's just kind of slid. When you look at closings happening now versus pendings versus last year, it's like the market just pushed forward, and now we're operating as if it was June of last year when you compare the market stats. So there was a little bit of a kind of a hesitation, and then really not much of a pivot for us. It was just a mindset thing of, all right, well, let's just keep doing what we're doing. We just have to modify the way that we're approaching people.
Right. There are pockets of areas that are not doing as well as the markets that we're in, guys. Right. I mean, we're in mostly outside of Manhattan, and Michael, you're kind of all over the place, being adjacent to Manhattan and New York City. What markets are not doing as well, or type of market? What markets are not doing as well? Is it the ones that are further away from a metropolitan area that aren't doing as well as we're talking, or is that not true?
No, actually, I would say just the opposite. During the quarantine, Sussex, Warren, Hunterdon were still jamming. Mm-hmm. They didn't have as much of the counts of the cases. So we actually saw them moving pretty well, whereas areas like Hoboken, I'm sure you can talk about this, Dave, Hoboken and some of those inner city areas were a little bit more shut down faster. Manhattan was interesting. And again, talking about the difference in the states, New York was a 90%, 95% shutdown of the real estate industry. The state actually came out and said, if you see a realtor working, report them to this hotline. It's $1,000 fine. So, when you look at the other states, I'm looking at my New York offices. We've kind of hit the floor in New Jersey, and we're springing back, whereas New York is still about 60 days behind us.
Yeah.
So I think those are other cities.
And I think just to look at that maybe more in the weeds, communal living, right? Everybody got out of New York because of elevators and because of just the fear of being around so many people. So that's why the Jersey cities and Hoboken slowed up a little bit quicker. I talked to a good friend of mine who owns the Sotheby's up in Boston, a guy named Larry Rideout, and he said all his suburbs are just booming, but he can't give away property in Boston. And then you see what came out last week, that New York City sales were down 57% in the second quarter. Well, that makes sense. They were already slowing, but if you couldn't get into a building, right, because the building's shut down, it'd be pretty tough to make a sale. If you can't show it, there's no amenities. Every restaurant has been closed, so there's less people in the city. You're going to have a number that plummets. It's probably not the real number, because think about it. How do you write a new contract in 2.5 months if you can't even get into the buildings? Because we had the same experience in New Jersey. We still have buildings that are very difficult to show and transact in today.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's probably just going to be a delay for those markets. Well, for Hoboken, definitely. Because like you said, people just got out of Dodge because they were going stir crazy or elevators or whatever it was. And so that kind of pent up demand, I think, is going to show up pretty soon. And, we were talking about this before the show started, just people just buying the headlines and not really reading into the detail of what's going on. And everybody talking about, everybody's asking me, so is it true? Is everybody just running from New York and running from the city and buying in the suburbs? That's not happening, really. That is the headline. But there's no real influx of people running from the city. I think that is things are going to just kind of go back to normal in terms of the way that people live, and the thought that people just gave up on city living because of this hasn't really shown up to be true yet.
Well, Dave,
I'm respectfully challenge that a little bit if I can. Because of after 9/11, a lot of folks leaving the city for more rural living in the last 15 years. The millennials has been the talk. Millennials want to be close to the city, close to public transportation. We're seeing quite a bit of influx of people from the city coming out here and start looking again. They want the bigger homes because they need the home office now. They want the finished basements in the bigger space because they're homeschooling this year. they're going back to wanting some yards because if they are quarantined, they want to have more space. I know, Charlie, you cover a lot of the suburbs as well. Are you seeing similar things to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would disagree with you, Dave, on a couple fronts. Number one, I think when people are evaluating where they are on the work position, let's take AIG last week that said we're going to downsize from 1 million square feet in the city to 400,000. They took 300,000 in addition in Jersey City, and they've told every employee, because my next door neighbor works for them, that they have the option of working from home for the next 2 years. Okay. So
commercial leases are in trouble.
So the whole commercial business, and I have to talk about that at noon to a group of commercial realtors, which will be a lot of fun. But when you think about it, as Michael just said, we're gonna use our house differently. So when you were looking for a 3-bedroom house, now you're looking for a 4-bedroom house because you need the classroom or the office. And I'll mention one other thing that's changed the dynamic. People don't look at the price right now. They look at the monthly payments. So when interest rates dropped from 4% to 2.8, your buying power just went up $1.20, $1.50. Right. So something listed at $795, and I'm just picking a number. You'll pay $950 even if it's not worth it because it's the same payment that you budgeted for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now you do have the inventory issue, which we chatted about, but your payment issue. And I would just throw one thing out there on inventory. Everybody talks about low inventory, and there is a shortage of inventory. But what the bigger shortage is shelf life. Is when a house comes on the market Friday and it's off the market Monday because it's got 4 offers and sold, it doesn't mean it's not inventory.
Right.
You can't sell more houses. There's less available.
So you know what I like to do? I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit. And I want to go back a little bit to what Dave was hitting on, is talking about what's going on and how things are going to come back. I believe that what's going to happen is we're going to see this lull. We're going to see this lull in city living, and it's going to come back. I think everything is going to come back, including office space, but in a different way. We're not going to use it the same way as we did before. I think what you might see, and this is pure opinion, guys, so you can chime in and tell me I'm nuts. I think you're going to find out that for a lot of the production in these work at home and school at home is going to be not what everybody thinks it should be. And that's where the offices are going to come back into play. That might take a year, 2 years. But I know that rents have plummeted already in Manhattan, like 20, 30%. I know a situation of a personal friend of mine, but where they were able to get an apartment for a lot less than they should have gotten. So, things are happening there, but I think it's all going to come back. And this is like, I believe that's to your point, Dave, isn't it?
I think so too. I think that we just haven't seen it yet. I wasn't saying that it's not going to happen. So when you look at these companies downsizing and the employees now being able to work from home, we're kind of waiting. We're nurturing those. That's where we're prospecting right now, especially in Hoboken and Jersey City, where there is kind of that lull. I think it's just inevitable that it's going to happen. We just haven't seen that like explosion of people coming out of Hoboken, of New York, to the suburbs. There's a little bit of it happening for sure. I think there's going to be a lot more of it happening as people start to get used to this and school starts.
I think that tends to be like a 2-year trend. We didn't see it right away after 9/11. It kind of happened because people have things they have to deal with there too. So I think it's something that we'll see more and more over the next couple of years. I know Charlie was talking about some rental stats earlier. I think you're starting to see those people come out and renting now, just to give them that flexibility and give them that room, but that they haven't yet decided whether or not they're abandoning the city to permanently move to the suburbs.
And I think
one comment for you on the commercial lease, Charlie, just so you're aware, kind of just to dovetail what we're talking about here. We just signed a commercial lease on Park Avenue in Manhattan for $17 a square foot. I mean, when was the last time you can imagine a commercial rent in Manhattan at $17 a square foot?
Yeah,
so that's.
You're going to see some crazy deals on big spaces just so people can occupy. But just to follow that up on the leasing, people are buying time more than anything else. And if you think about it, I mean, we've rented some houses for $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 a month from big New York City executives because of school. Mm-hmm. They have a better chance to get their kids into a school in New Jersey than sending them into the city, even if it's to a private school, because there's uncertainty. You've read everything about the Hamptons, right? In a number of communities in the Hamptons, they're telling the kids that if you don't live here year round, you might not be welcome in the classroom. I want to see that fight, because if I'm a taxpayer and I live in my own house in that community and decide to live there year round, how are you going to keep my kids from the school? But you're seeing a lot of that. So I'm not sure that the market doesn't change dramatically over the next couple of years. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because you have millennials who are still the wealthiest group out there now. They bypassed the boomers a long time ago. They're also the biggest first-time buyer. Okay, first-time buyers 2 years ago was at 29%. Right now it's at about 36% nationally. Because they were renting and rents were so high and the interest rates are so low, they're now going and buying $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 homes anywhere, including the shore. We've got people that are commuting from a Spring Lake or any of the shore areas to the city twice a week, and they're going to work at home. So there are a lot of factors in the marketplace. And if you go down to Monmouth Ocean County, you talk about a lack of inventory. That's really where the biggest hit has been.
Yeah, I think that segues perfectly into the next topic where we're talking about, okay, home and school, homework, home school. What I mean, look, you know what? I gave you my ideas of what I think is going to happen over the next couple of years. I have more thoughts on that, but I want to get your thoughts, guys, on is it like I mentioned that I think it's going to change. What's the effect on it in today's residential market, and your thoughts on what it's going to look like in the beginning of 21?
I think it really has yet to be seen how people are going, like long term, are going to function working from home. If you look at our job, real estate agents, really highly productive real estate agents, I don't see working from home by themselves forever.
Right.
But I don't think we could really tell yet. It hasn't been enough time. I think it's going to take a while. And there will be a lot of things in the market that could affect that, right? Because you know, people working from home, you have to think about people who are in forbearance, who maybe got a 3 or deferment on their mortgage, 3 months,
32%.
and they got 34%. Then they got another 3 months, and also they got deferment on their credit cards, their bills, their car. All of that's going to come to a head. And it's going to affect credit. It's going to affect people's ability to qualify. And the millennials have the lowest credit scores out of any generation right now. So I think that, combined with all the shadow inventory, there's going to be kind of a boom in distressed property that's coming. Because you also have now it's 7 months of sheriff sales that were canceled and delayed. So those are going to be foreclosed on, or, some of them might get loan mods or whatever. But I think there's going to be a big rise in distressed properties and distressed credit, which definitely could affect people's ability to work from home. It's hard to work from home if they're getting foreclosed on.
Yeah. We still have the largest amount of shadow inventory and foreclosures in the country pre-COVID. So I don't think that's much of a change. I think what could change is the way that the banks in the future dispose of properties, because now the dollars, which may not have meant as much in the past, mean a lot more when their earnings have been hurt. So I think you might see a change in structure as the way they choose who's going to represent them or how they liquidate their assets in the future.
Yeah, so in some states, it's 90 days from the time they stop paying the mortgage to foreclosure. In New Jersey, it's 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
That number, it was about 33%. It was a number I saw in an article. I'll get it for you, Dave. 33% nationally in the month of June paid less than their full monthly mortgage payment. So when you talk about the number of people on deferral or some agreement, almost a third of all mortgage holders in the country.
And here's the biggest problem. The credit bureaus have been notified by the lenders, even though they said they wouldn't be, There's a number said that they're in default, and now your credit took a hit because of a representation that was made and not adhered to.
Just to go back to your comment, Dave, on the whole schooling thing,
Right.
we've got to remember as business owners and brokers, we have a large population of female realtors, and a lot of those are the working moms that juggle the school and the job. And
Right.
they're the folks that are going to be impacted at a really high level as schools start back up, because they're going to try to keep their business going while they're being a teacher and everything else. And I don't know about you guys, I don't see school happening much past September. I think the first time we see an outbreak in a school where, as it is, we're only half day in my town, 3 days a week, half day, 3 days a week, and off Tuesdays, home Tuesdays, Thursdays. So I think you're going to see a lot of pressure and stress on a lot of the realtors.
I think you look at other states, what's happened in Georgia, what's happened in Texas and other states as far as schools are concerned. And you can talk about this entire thing on whether, there's so many theories out there, and I'm not going to really get into what the theories are and the different thoughts on it. But, where's it going to go? Where's it going to end? How much are we going to stop stuff? And I wanted to pick up, you guys have been really good, because as I'm going down the notes I have, you guys are going I don't even have to tell you what to talk about. You're going right down my notes. Dave, you'd mentioned something about share sales not happening for a long time. Can you guys address share sales? And Charlie, you addressed shadow inventory, which was next on my list. So if you guys can address this is just pertain to this area in New Jersey. What about share sales? Has that been something that's happened all over the country where they've been stopped?
I don't know. I know in California they have. I would imagine. I mean, you couldn't pack people into a room to have an auction during COVID, but I don't know for sure.
Right, and keep in mind the way this virus happened, Dave. It started in New York, New Jersey, and worked to different parts of the country. So they may have been able to operate in March, April, and May when we were shut down. And now that we're open, some of the courts are starting to open back up a little bit and doing a certain couple of things. Michael, I just wanted to touch on the numbers in terms of agencies. You'd be amazed. I think the breakdown's about 65% women in the business and 35% men. But you'll also be amazed at how many men are the teachers and not the wage earner in the family. We have an agent that's got 3 kids, I think 5, 9, and 12. So 3 different schools, 3 different curriculums. And I guess in May, he sent me a text. Would I be interested in being the substitute teacher on Monday because he had it? So you're 100% right. The homeschooling aspect is so underrated because of the stress it puts on the whole family. And we've also seen, when you talk about coming back to work, we've seen less agents in the office, but it's also the summer. So it's a hard gauge. I think the better gauge comes September, what we're going to look like if there is homeschooling and not full classrooms. Some of our offices, I get 30 or 40 people in right now, socially distant, not all at the same time. And then other markets, you might get 5 or 6 in a day, and that's it. And they're just as busy as they could be, but it's a different way of working.
Yep.
I think, Dave, also, depending on the market, there will be little pockets of surge in inventory. For example, probate, estates and trusts, divorce. The surrogate court was closed as well. So I think as that starts to open up, and when you think about China, after the pandemic had the highest divorce rate times like 100, that could also push a lot of inventory to the market. And if Jersey City putting a ban on Airbnb or putting a pretty heavy restriction on Airbnb a year after they had a reval that doubled and tripled some landlords' taxes that have rent control, I think it's going to be a factor too, because there's a grandfather clause for that Airbnb that's up in January of 2021. And we saw that in Union City 3 or 4 years ago when they banned Airbnb. There was they all just sold their properties. And I think we're going to see a lot of that as well. For the high equity owner who's had these buildings for a long time.
So
You comment on the divorce rate. I just make one comment on the divorce rate. Wait to see the birth rate in December, January, February of this year.
No,
I'm willing to bet. And we know after a hurricane and a power shortage, there's a ripple effect 9 months later. Wait till we see the birth rate after 2-3 months of quarantine. It's going to be off the hook.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, you and David are the youngsters here. This business goes in cycles. I can remember when our classrooms had 30 and 35 kids, and there were 4 kindergartens, and now that family structure might be a little bit different. Now you have 3 kindergartens with 15 kids. So, what happens in cycles is always kind of interesting, and we always overanalyze it because it's what we all do. But I think when you look at this, I'm not sure there's ever going to feel like there's a surge in inventory because the buyer pool is so deep that it goes back to my initial comment. When a listing comes on the market one week and it's gone by the weekend, it never feels like it was on the market because they're in and out. I think if there's really an adjustment on some pricing on the inventory that's sitting there, then you'll feel an inventory shortage to a point where we haven't, because then this inventory that's been there 6 months, a year, 2 years on some of the higher end properties, because we've sold a lot of high end properties. Surprisingly, I think if that starts to move, now we've got a real story.
I think what we're going to see is, look, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see ripples, as Michael has said, ripples in inventory for a lot of reasons. You talked about the baby boom of the pandemic baby boom. We're going to see, number one. We're going to see divorce rates, number two. We're going to see, a death boom to a point for probates and stuff. So we're going to see those kinds of things. But one of the other things we're going to see is there are going to be people that have been stuck in their homes that realize that I hate this place. I got to get another. They're going to move like that. And they're also people. I'll give you an example. People are fixing up their homes and they're spending the money they're getting or the money they have on their homes. There's a Lowe's near me that before the pandemic was always empty. Since the pandemic, it is packed every day. I don't know why. It just is, right? So we're going to see, I believe what we're going to see is we're going to see an up and down flux, and then things are going to even out where we might even get to something we haven't had for 20 years. And I like to use that word normal, a normal market, which I think the last day we really had a normal market was September 10th, 2001. That's just my opinion. But, what do you guys think about my bold predictions there?
I would be curious to hear, Charlie, because you're going to be talking to commercial agents. I would be curious to hear your opinion on how commercial is going to affect the residential market and what is going to happen with commercial.
Commercial is just going to be across the board. You've got repositioning of industrial properties, which are booming because of online shopping. You have some companies that are actually looking at bigger spaces. To Michael's point, if you can get something for $17 a foot, there are going to be companies that are going to take bigger spaces to provide more social distancing. I think that the two biggest concerns with commercial brokerage right now are if there's a change in administration, the Biden real estate plan is not very healthy for any of us, but certainly the commercial side of the business will be affected. They're looking at eliminating 1031s, for instance. So everybody thinks 1031s are just done by the big players when over 90% are done by the four of us.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's just a misconception and why it's so important for us to be able to get to the legislators. You'll see a repositioning of shopping centers potentially. Right. Look at Riverside Mall in Hackensack is basically becoming restaurants. Okay, it had already transformed before the pandemic, right? But now they're hurt as restaurants because they have no indoor seating, and I don't know that that's happening before the end of the year. So when you look at the commercial retail space, where does that go when the cold weather comes and they can't have outdoor or indoor seating? And you and I aren't going to go out to pick up something for dinner when it's 12 degrees out, and you're waiting in a snowstorm or whatever it is. So, there are a lot of factors that are going to go in there. Plus, you have a lot of the big mortgages that are balloon mortgages, and the refinance market's going to be challenged. And then you go one last step further with what the GSEs did yesterday, Fannie and Freddie. They put an extra basis point on refinances. Okay. So that doesn't help the housing industry, where somebody wants to take cash out and buy another property. Now it costs them more money to get money. So a lot of things happening. And by the way, David, I've only got 5 minutes to speak to him, and I've got about 20 pages of notes.
Yeah.
So
Dave, if I could just add 2 stats. We were talking a lot about supply and demand. 2 stats for your listeners to write down. In the 60 days post-quarantine, June 1st to July 30th, this is GSMLS, Garden State MLS. Listing inventory is up 8% versus the same period of time last year. But under contracts are up 43%. So as we're talking about the bidding wars and the prices and things like that, we've got a 43% increase in demand, but only an 8% increase in supply over the same period of last year. So
what's
that's
the
an important
barrier
discussion
for that, Michael? Where is that, Michael?
What's that?
Is that nationally, Michael?
What's that?
Is that nationally you're talking about?
No, that's in the Garden State MLS specifically. That's the GSMLS number. Okay. I've been pulling that every 2 weeks from the GSMLS and tracking it. During April and May, new listings taken in the Garden State were down 60 and 70%.
Right.
And coming out of it, it's only up 8. So, year to date, we're lagging about 20% behind the same period last year on listings taken in the Garden State MLS. So when you see a 20% down in inventory added to the market with a 40-50% increase in under contracts, that's what's creating the chaos that we're all feeling out there in the market when it comes to the bidding wars and the offers. So again, just some stats to write down.
So I want to turn the conversation a little bit to actually real estate agents, realtors, and what's going on with the actual. We mentioned the term 80-20 and 90-10 and 92-8. Do you believe? Any of you guys believe that we're going to have a massive loss in the numbers of realtors in the country and locally? What do you think is going on there? Like for instance, NJMLS just had their new dues paid, and I'm on the board of directors there. I don't know what the numbers are yet. I might find them out later today. But what do you guys think is going to happen there? And Charlie, what have you seen nationally?
A lot of things nationally. Our business is always under attack. With the MLSs and everything that goes on. Yet I think it's still the most pro-competitive, pro-friendly, consumer-based way of doing business. And I can't imagine if we picture some of the foreign countries that don't have MLSs. One of the big things that we're going to be looking at is fair housing, right? What we're dealing with. Can you imagine if we didn't have an MLS and you talked about discrimination in fair housing? There are just so many items. MLSs, we've seen consolidation. We've seen across the country. And I think it's just more of efficiencies. When we go to what Michael was talking about, inventory, you just are going to have that demand as long as interest rates stay, in my opinion, below 4.5%. Again, being one of the old timers here, the first house I sold in 1981, the interest rate was 19.5%.
Wow.
I remember that.
Okay. Yeah. Now you were getting 15% on your money at the bank, except you didn't have any money in the bank. It was too expensive to live. And so there are, again, there's so many factors that go into the whole buying and selling process. I do think the one thing that amazes me is when people talk about and agents talk about the market. Oh, it's hot. It's this. There's 2 markets. There's a seller's market and a buyer's market. That's it.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. And right now, it's a seller's market because there's minimal inventory, low interest rates, high demand, extra wealth in the stock market for a lot of people. I mean, there's so many different factors. And the unemployment numbers, if you really drill down and don't get into the headlines, a lot of the high-paying jobs stayed in place. We've lost a lot of the service jobs, the restaurants, the hotel industry, the travel industry. Okay, that eventually will come back. But I'll leave you with one thought: Tell me how business travel is going to rebound when you can have a meeting on a Zoom call or any kind of virtual call. Why would you get on a plane and travel for 2 days for a 2-hour meeting when we can do this?
Yeah. So Charlie,
500 million business travelers, 500 million trips a year for business travel that have been completely taken out of the airline industry right now.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a huge change.
And hotel rooms and restaurants.
Yep.
And I want to add something to it. You talked about seller market, you talked about buyer's market, right? But let's talk about the individual real estate agent, which is a concern to me, simply because who's working, who's not. Well, again, I'm getting back to the 80-20, the 90-10. Would you say that is actually in a worker's market where the ones that are actually doing the work are actually going to get the business? Rarely, I think, we're going to see people just doing the onesies and twosies anymore. What do you guys think about that?
I think you're dead right there. The 1 and 2 deal year people have kind of non-existent in the last couple of months because of quarantine, whereas some of the big teams are doing more business than they've ever done before because they've already got marketing systems set up and multiple agents on it. You asked about the population of real estate agents, Dave. I think what we're going to see is you're going to see people that have been in the business 35, 40 years saying, we're ready to retire. We don't want to reinvent ourselves yet again. And the people that are just a year in the business that say they didn't sign up for this. But I don't know if you guys have real estate schools. The real estate schools are booming right now. The real estate schools have more people in them now that we could do them virtually for the first time ever. I mean, we've licensed 90 people in the last 60 days. So you're seeing a huge influx of those people that were furloughed or laid off coming and getting the real estate license, kind of what happened back in 2001, 2002. So I think you're going to see a turnover.
Because it's an easy business, right?
Yeah. Anyone can do it. You make $1 million a year.
You're also seeing an increase in the quality of coaching and training. And through COVID, a lot of the top agents went really deep into coaching and training and doing videos, and a lot of it given away for free. And Dave, you see it too, right? So I think it is a good time for a new agent to get into the business if they're willing to work and they're willing to learn. With regard to 80-20 and 90-10, I think, and I want to hear your guys' opinion on this too, the change in the MLS locally, I think is going to have an effect on people too, with regard to how they're reporting statistics, how they're using statistics to win listings. And those statistics are going to change for the teams where the team leader who's out winning the listings doesn't do a lot of the business, and they're just using the stats of the agents on their team.
Yeah, that's a topic, an interesting topic for discussion. That
might be a whole other call. I'd love to be part of that call because kind of what they're doing and making that change is going to disrupt a lot of the big businesses like Dave's, and that team is going to be affected quite a bit from a stats perspective.
So I'm hitting the phones again.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, teams are one thing. Brokerages are another. What do you guys see as far as, we got to stop in a couple of minutes. We've got a hard stop here in 2 minutes, but just one quick question as we move forward. What do you guys see as bricks and mortar changing? Is that going to change? Is it going to be less people going into the office? And are bricks and mortar going to be as necessary as they were before? And is it going to be less space?
I mean, from a team perspective, I think it depends. We're going back in tomorrow. And Monday we're going back into our office to work because our group, we like to be together. We like to work together. We like to prospect together, but there is a large amount of agents who are not going to come back in. So I think it's going to be preference in how they operate. Brokerage is much different. You guys could comment on that.
I would just say a lot of it's market to market. Some of our biggest bricks and mortar are also our busiest offices, and they do come in. Other offices are much smaller with a different intent and different locations. So I think it's a little bit early to try to make a judgment on that because, and we all have different models. Some like to have bigger agent pool and others operate differently. So it really varies from place to place and how you operate. It also depends on the market. Some markets in some of the cities or locations with no parking or challenged parking might be just kiosks versus And I've got a friend in Washington State who's downsized all his offices. And guess what he's doing now? Upsizing. So, as things change.
So I want to thank you all for coming on today. By the way, Charlie, Larry Radite is also a friend of mine. I've known Larry for a long time. Charlie, yeah. I know it was hard getting you on, but when you found out you were getting this, you said no problem. Like you were going to be getting a hat because Dave's got his and Michael's got his because they've been on the show before. And I just the first time joining us. We hope to get you on again as time goes on. Guys, I asked this question. I learned this from a very good friend of mine and coach of mine, Sekou Pyle, that asked this one question all the time. How can I help you guys in your business and what you do on a day-to-day basis? What can I do, Dave Finale, do to help you guys?
Keep being you, Dave. Bringing this content.
Keep doing what you're doing and having these healthy discussions among real estate professionals because we're all in this together. We all need each other to grow. So I think this is awesome. It was nice hanging out with Charlie and Dave and chatting with you guys.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave everybody with one last thought, and hopefully a lot of people are watching. Don't take COVID for granted. Get your forms and your disclosures, your releases signed. Wear your mask. Make sure you find out if somebody's coming from a quarantine state. I mean, there's a lot of things that are under state executive order that we are having agents take for granted. And if anybody looked at the numbers, not that they've spiked a lot, but they didn't go down last week. Okay.
Right.
You know what? It's important.
Well, guys, I want to thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming. Guys, stay on for 1 second after we go off. Charlie, thank you so much. Dave, thank you. Michael, thank you. Like next week, we have an international panel coming on from Canada and the United States. That should be a lot of fun. We're going to keep going as long as we can. And like I said, it's 111 weeks. Haven't missed a week yet. I don't intend to. Guys, thanks so much. And we'll see you on the flip side.
Appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Dave.
Guys, good seeing you.
Take care, Michael, Dave.
You too.
So, guys.